there have been a lot more benchmarks or indices created. Not all of them seem to follow simple rules. Sometimes they claim they follow rules, but then they actually don't. And then if you ask, they're not obliged to reply, or they're like, who the hell are you? And so I feel there's a lot going on where people are using index manufacturing as a way to create, like, I mean, in a sense, what look like passive funds, but actually aren't really passive in any meaningful sense. And there is discretion involved here as well. So I know you both have a lot to say, but I'm just throwing this out there. Uh, how much of a benchmark are your benchmark indices really?
Only if they are broad-based, market cap weighted indices, which don't change as often. So Nifty 500 or Sensex 500 or Nifty 50 and so on. I think those which incur very little transactions, the turnover is very low, maybe rebalanced once in 6 months. Those are the only truly passive vehicles. Everything else, now we have hundreds of these indices from both manufacturers. There are only two. And I think it's also they also provide it as a service, where if you want to create a product, you can approach them, they'll create a product for you, and then you can launch an index fund or an ETF on that index. But each index, apart from the broad ones, are basically backtests now. Like you can take one factor, take one universe, or combine two factors, and then you have any number of combinations, and you'll have basically each backtest becomes an index.
Like a value plus growth index.
Sure. And then you can do it on the top 500 or the top 150 or the middle 150, and each one can be different. It can be top 200, and then from the top 200 universe, the best 30, or the top 500 universe, the best 50. You can keep creating these combinations endlessly.
And there's no limit on the number of, since it's based on an index or a...
So there's no, so while we have categories, SEBI has created these categories 2018. I think there's a new consultation paper happening in the works where we are reassessing those categories. But there's no limit on the number of index funds you can create. So you can have like, okay, I can only have 20, 30, 40 categories, whatever. But index fund, I can have hundreds of them. And there's no limit on it. So I think it's getting abused a little bit, both under thematics as well as indices. I think we'll see some action there soon. But the other bigger problem I have with this is index manufacturers are not regulated. Unless you have an index with more than 5 crores earning on it, there is no regulation. 5,000 crores. So, and there was no even a regulation like anything with the name index manufacturer or index provider till I think last year. So up in 2024, there was zero regulation on index manufacturing. But they are quasi fund managers. So
and the biggest ones in the country.
So it makes they have to be more responsible. So I need more transparency from them. And there should not be a duopoly on providing indices. I think only exchanges can today create indices. I think the reason is because they claim copyright on the prices. I think stock prices should not be copyrightable, and they should be public information. Anybody should be able to use it. I think there was some discussion on it from the regulator before, whether some of this data should be provided to everyone for free. Well, they can obviously charge for it, but they can't have exclusive ownership of prices because they are not created by them. It is created by the entire public trading on public stocks.
I think my view on this, I'll give you one thing particularly on the index manufacturing front. The index manufacturers have the same economics as the fund managers, except they don't have any regulation. So which means that an index manufacturer can say that if you use my index to create an index fund, please pay me 2 bips, 3 bips, a percentage of the amount you manage. Now, mutual fund manager exactly the same thing, right? So mutual fund manager also saying, listen, I earn a percentage of the funds I manage.
Hopefully more than 2 bips, but
well, yeah, I mean, this thing. But in some of the index manufacturers charge as much as 10 bips. So they are quasi fund managers without the regulation. So I don't think that's fair. I think that's important to bring them under the regulatory universe as well. So you want to be sure there isn't any hanky panky when they select stocks to do this. And they often make confoundingly difficult to understand decisions on certain stocks. So you would think the Nifty 100 equals the top 100 stocks by free float market cap. That's it. That should be the end of that story. But no, they will agonize over, oh, this stock has now come into the top 100, but can we somehow not include it, or can we don't know. So people actually take wager over whether stocks are going to get included in the top 100 or the top 50 by thinking about, oh, whether is the index manufacturer going to allow this stock to be a part of that index or not. And if it does become a part of the index, the stock goes up. To give you an example, there's about 7 lakh or 8 lakh crores chasing just the Nifty 50 as an index. Okay, so the adding a new stock to the Nifty 50 index would involve a corresponding amount of money. Let's say a new stock comes in with a 1% weightage on the Nifty 50 index. Of 7 lakh crores, 7,000 crores is going to flow into that stock. And it's all going to flow in one day. And 7,000 to be in the Nifty today, you probably need about a market cap of 1,50,000 to 1,75,000 crores. If you give 7,000 crores to a stock which has about 1,75,000 or 2 lakh crores, that's 3.5% of its overall stock. This thing. So assuming that some of these stocks have like 70-75% ownership by promoters, the free float is actually relatively small. I mean, that way. Although to be fair, free float is what is considered. But let's say 75% is held by institutions. The float that is actually being traded in the market is only 20 or 25%. Now, index funds have to come and buy in another 3% of that stock. That constricts the free float even more. When I say free, I mean like stuff that's normally traded in the market. You end up with this position of a stock finding it prestigious to be in the top 50 stocks of the country, not because they're the top 50 stocks, but because 3.5 or 4% of that stock is locked into funds that can't sell as long as the stock is in the top 50. So they can't sell because you're performing badly. They can't sell because you're doing something wrong. So every company technically now wants to be
in some equivalent of this.
and the managers that are deciding this are not human managers. I mean, they are human, of course. They're not managers who are beholden to a trust of investors who can question them on why have they made the decision. They're completely independent players saying, listen, we made our index, we're doing it, we're doing whatever we want. You can't question us on why we've added or not added a stock. So this adds a layer of discretion, which I think is not useful. Another second part about this index fund piece, and I think there's a smaller thing, is that because they have the economics of fund manager, of mutual funds itself, they are not required to educate people at the same time on how complex, risky, or otherwise useful their indexes are for people of different risk weightages and categories, whereas a mutual fund is required to do so. I think adding that layer is also important to say that your dissemination should be public.
When we were creating our NFO presentation and so on, we had to give disclaimers saying this is all historical, this is all simulated information and so on and backtest. Index fund providers, when come up with a new index, they create a fact sheet, and it looks like they don't have as many disclosures there saying that, oh, look, this is all simulated, it is not real. I mean, it's not actual performance and so on. So they are playing by much looser rules in that sense compared to actual product manufacturers.
I think just two reactions to what you've both said is the first is I think when these benchmarks started out, they were more boring. Nifty 50, Nifty 500, mid-cap index and whatever. And so there wasn't as much of a need for regulation. But then either through the cleverness of market participants and the ambition of the people running these, they realized that they could do a lot more. And so let's create indices that are in a sense...
It also took a while for them to normalize.
Yeah.
There was a period, I think 3 or 4 years, where Sensex was free float market cap weighted and Nifty was
I think the other way.
full market cap weighted.
Oh, wow. So
I think there's a long period of 2-3 years where there were different methodologies
fair.
And used by the two most important benchmarks.
To be fair, the Nifty, the way the top 100 stocks are determined is based on full market cap, not free float, by AMFI. But the indexes are based on free float. So you could have a stock in the top 100 that does not appear in the Nifty or the BSE 100 simply because they take free float and the AMFI does not. So what do you do as a large cap fund? Can you? I mean,
When you benchmark against the Nifty
Yeah,
100.
yes.
Okay.
So it's a very interesting change in thought process. Yeah.
Okay. And the other one was, I think the point that we're really trying to underscore here is that there are people who presumably are invested in making the Indian market ecosystem stronger. They are taking decisions that they probably feel are in the best interest of investors. But it becomes you're ending up taking these decisions in a sense, I mean, quietly in the backgrounds without as much accountability. So even if you are actually saving us all from the worst possible outcomes out there, this is not something that deserves to be in back rooms and needs to be brought out in front, just like everything else eventually has been.
Yes, I mean, and I won't even go into debt because in debt it's so complicated that when they created a bunch of indexes around with debt products from certain companies, they literally had to say, listen, they have a debt instrument that's not exactly the same debt instrument because that company did not have the exact same instrument available. But these guys have bought some other fund which is kind of close. This kind of close is now another rule that complicates matters around debt. So like you said, at some point all of these rules, these arrangements and all that stuff need to be more publicly vettable, maybe questionable, and like Vashish said, that without having to have more than the two index providers that we have, with no copyright on prices by the exchanges.
Also, as an investor, if somebody is launching a index fund, it's fine. How do I verify whether because you are required to disclose the methodology for that fund, but without seeing the historical holdings for which you have created the historical NAV curve, how do I verify whether you consistently applied the same rule set or not? So based on whatever is disclosed by index manufacturers, I can't independently verify whether the sanctity of the historical backtest, because they don't share the historical holdings.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully. Past performance may or may not be sustained in future and is not a guarantee of any future returns.